The sun rises sluggish and red above the Mesopotamian plain, casting long shadows across the cracked soil and half-buried bones of forgotten wars. Here, in the stretch between the Tigris and Euphrates, blood has watered the earth for centuries. And now, in the haze of early conquest, a new ruler begins his reign not from a throne, but from a battlefield soaked in dust and the stench of rot. His name is scarcely recorded, scrawled in cuneiform on broken clay, and whispered through time as a figure of both awe and dread. Scholars debate whether he was a Sumerian warlord or an early Assyrian proto-king, born of nomadic clans that once scraped survival from the mud brick cities and reed marshes. But what they agree on is this: he came with fire, and he left no room for mercy. He is called the Golden King. No crown marks his rise, no coronation of hymns and wine. Instead, he conquers city by city, temple by temple, riding under the black standard of a jackal's head devouring the sun. The image is burned into the eyes of survivors, priests nailed to ziggurats, children marched away as trophies. In Lagash, he demands the statue of their moon god be melted for arrowheads. In Uruk, he slaughters the High Council and replaces them with silence. He rules not through inheritance, but through spectacle. In the market squares of subjugated cities, prisoners are paraded in gilded cages. Gold dust is poured over their heads before execution, a mockery of holiness. Every public death is theater, every victory a ritual. The Golden King believes in omens, believes in signs. And so every conquest is not just a war, it is prophecy fulfilled, or so he claims. Whispers move faster than armies. Some say he sleeps beneath sheets of hammered bronze, that he drinks fermented mare's milk stirred with crushed scorpions. Others say he has no tongue, that it was cut out in childhood, and he speaks through a mask of carved obsidian, eyes forever veiled. What is known, what is scratched into the brittle stone of a ruined archive, is this. In the 23rd century BCE, a massive royal palace rises along the Diyala River, its columns lined with lapis lazuli and lion teeth. It is said to shine so brightly at noon, it blinds the approaching traveler. A fortress not just of walls, but of myth. His empire stretches from the Zagros Mountains to the edge of the Arabian sands, but it is not built to last. Nothing built on blood ever does. One single artifact survives from this age, a dagger, forged from meteoric iron, wrapped in gold filament. It was found beneath the shattered floor of a burial mound, far from any known capital. Etched along its blade, nearly lost to time, he who commands the sun shall never die. This is not just vanity, it is his core belief. The Golden King declares himself divine, not metaphorically, not in symbol, but in absolute. He is Shamash reborn, not a servant of the sun god, but the sun god made flesh. He orders golden effigies of himself erected in every city-state positioned to face the dawn. But something changes. In the 4th decade of his reign, the omens shift. A solar eclipse turns midday to dusk. A scorpion plague ravages the harvest. His court astrologers whisper of an ancient curse, scribbled in Proto-Akkadian on a stone tablet stolen from a buried shrine. A curse that speaks of a man who would steal fire from the gods and drown in his own gold. He responds with rage. Temples are sealed, their priests burned with oil. The stars are no longer red, they are silenced. Anyone who speaks of the curse is buried alive. In place of prophecy, he builds statues, larger, louder, taller than the city walls. His obsession with gold becomes grotesque. He taxes it from the poor. He strips it from the dead. Every chamber of his palace glitters. Even the floor tiles shimmer, laced with powdered ore. He believes gold is not wealth. It is protection, a barrier between him and what he cannot control. But the shadows deepen. A forgotten letter, preserved in the hollow of a clay envelope, survives in the archives of Nippur. It is addressed to a neighboring king. It reads, "The sun god is cracking. He bleeds light. He sees omens in every cup of wine. I fear the madness is upon him." And still, the Golden King builds. His final project is a tomb, though he never calls it that. To his architects, it is the chamber of eternal ascent. It is hidden in a mountain gorge, unreachable by cart or caravan. Supplies are ferried in by slaves, blindfolded and silenced. The walls are coated not with paint, but with molten gold, not inlay flooded, poured into grooves, onto ceilings, across carved faces of gods no longer worshipped. There is no sarcophagus, only a pit at the center of the chamber, and here historians find silence. The chamber is never found intact. The ruins discovered millennia later show signs of collapse, looting, fire. But the gold, some of it remains, fused to the rock like veins. In places, it's burned into the skeletons of men who once served him. What truly happened in that golden tomb? Some say he was buried alive, encased in molten wealth by his own priests as an offering. Others say he drank poison in a final ritual and was lowered into the pit before the gold was poured. A few fringe accounts suggest something stranger, that he demanded his still-living body be drowned in liquid gold, believing it would transmute his flesh into something eternal. The truth, like the king, is entombed in gold and dust. The throne room of the Golden King is not a place for audience. It is a stage, vast and echoing, with ceilings vanishing into darkness and walls that glint with molten light. Incense hangs thick in the air, burning myrrh, crushed cedar, the sweet rot of dried lotus. At the far end, the throne itself rises from a tiered dais of polished basalt, backed by a colossal disk of gold, carved to resemble the blazing sun. And yet, the figure who sits upon it is a shadow. He is always veiled. A mask, black stone, mouthless, expressionless, covers his face. Its eye sockets are hollow, unlit, but he sees. His robes are layered with gold leaf, crackling when he moves. Beneath them, a chill, not of cold, but of something restrained, something sick. What remains of the man behind the mask is known only through fragments, clay cylinder seals, disjointed scribes' notes, and the rare letters smuggled out by foreign envoys. They speak of a king who no longer eats in public, who drinks only from obsidian goblets, their rims laced with silver to detect poison, who insists that mirrors be shattered, fearing his reflection may betray him. He fears many things. At the beginning of his reign, he was brutal but lucid. His military strategies were efficient. His reforms, though cruel, streamlined trade and conscription. He was, if nothing else, rational in his terror. But the longer he held power, the more it warped him. The divine claims weren't always part of his rule. In his early years, he merely referred to himself as Lugal Gal, Great King. It was only after the death of his first son, a boy rumored to have drowned in a gilded fountain, that he changed his title to Shamash in flesh. From then on, every law bore the seal of a sun disk. Every decree was spoken not by him, but through a line of interpreters. His actual voice was never heard again. Rumors swirled that he had removed his own tongue in grief, or punishment, or madness, and then came the dreams. A clay tablet preserved in the Ashurbanipal library centuries later records the testimony of a palace guard. It reads, "At night he walks the roof alone. The stars frighten him. He speaks to the sky in words no one knows. Once I saw him collapse and scream as if the moon had burned him. Night became his enemy. Torches were extinguished. Light was forbidden except at noon, when the sun stood at its highest, and he sat in stillness beneath the sky's gaze." He believed, some scholars argue, that as long as he bathed in direct sunlight daily, death could not touch him. Others disagree. They argue that his sun worship masked a deeper, more destructive belief that the only way to transcend mortality was not through glory, but through gold. He began to study the ancient metalsmiths, not just their tools, but their rituals. He brought alchemists from distant lands, Elam, Mari, even from beyond the Zagros range. He tasked them with impossible questions. Can gold preserve the soul? Can flesh be gilded without decay? What happens when a body becomes metal? His palace became a prison of experimentation. Servants vanished. Slaves returned glistening, their skin lacquered in liquid shine, many of them disfigured or dead within days. The court physicians protested. They were hanged with gold wire. The king's body, too, began to change. Witnesses described open sores along his arms, blistering from prolonged contact with heated gold. His hands, once strong from war, trembled constantly. He wore gloves of silk to hide the shaking. His eyes, hidden behind the obsidian mask, were said to be sunburned. his pupils so constricted he could barely see in darkness, and yet he would not stop. Every prophecy he once destroyed, he now rewrote. There is one peculiar account preserved in the archives of Ebla describing a failed assassination attempt. A servant, bribed by exiled priests, was discovered trying to slip powdered hemlock into the king's ceremonial incense. He was captured, bound in gold-threaded rope, and burned alive. But the detail that survives is stranger. The king did not order his death. He demanded the servant be brought to the throne room, stripped, and coated in molten gold while still breathing. Scholars debate whether this is the first recorded instance of what would later be mythologized: death by molten gold. Was it here that the king's obsession shifted from symbolism to practice? Was it then he realized what gold could do, not just to preserve, but to punish? His enemies had dwindled, but his fear had not. He no longer trusted his own guards. He built a second mask, twice as thick, and slept with it on. His bedchambers were encased in reflective bronze. It is said he couldn't bear to be touched, not even by his concubines, who were replaced by painted wooden effigies, each plated in gold, each bearing his own face. Then came the final eclipse, a complete blackening of the sun, mid-harvest. The empire fell silent, livestock fled, crops withered, and the king, once proud, once furious, fell into catatonia for 3 days. When he emerged, he was no longer a man, at least not in the eyes of his people. He called for the final pouring. The heat is unbearable. Deep within the gorge, a wound in the belly of the earth, the tomb of the Golden King waits. Carved from black stone veined with quartz, the chamber breathes with the weight of something ancient and watching. The walls pulse with trapped heat, seeping from iron crucibles and gold furnaces that have burned day and night for weeks. The molten metal flows like lava down carved channels, illuminating the chamber in a flickering, hellish glow. Above it all, a platform of obsidian rises in the center. Upon it, the king stands motionless, arms outstretched, robes stripped away. His body is lean, wasted, blistered by the very gold he worships. Veins crawl beneath translucent skin like smoke trapped in glass. His mask, no longer of obsidian, but a solid sheet of hammered gold, has no eyes, no mouth. It reflects the firelight like a god refusing to speak. The ritual begins. It is not written down, not fully. Fragments of it survive in a scorched scroll, later found sealed inside a jar near the ruins. They speak of 13 priests, cloaked in sun-dyed wool, hands painted in gold dust, chanting in a language older than the city itself. They speak not to the gods, but to the king himself, addressing him as the risen flame. No one speaks of mourning, no prayers for passage, no songs for the underworld. This is not a death. It is a rebirth. At least that is what he insists, but something in the air says otherwise. The temperature in the chamber rises past 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Gold, heated in massive cauldrons, begins to bubble. The air ripples, choking. Even the stone walls weep condensation. Slaves work in silence, pouring the molten gold into prepared channels that snake toward the obsidian platform. The king never moves. His final words, spoken only to his high priest days before, are recorded in a stolen fragment of temple script. I must become more than flesh. Let the sun consume me. As the liquid metal approaches, there is hesitation. Some priests falter. They look to one another. This is no symbolic anointing, no wax seal of kingship. This is transformation by fire, and they are to be witnesses not of ascension, but of a man melting into myth. And yet the king remains still. The first wave of molten gold reaches the base of the platform. Steam hisses violently. The carved runes along the steps glow red, then white. The priests begin to chant louder, faster, until their words dissolve into a kind of terrified rhythm. The gold rises higher, licking the king's feet, his ankles. No cry escapes. The mask glows brighter, heat warping its shape. His knees, hips, arms, all slowly consumed. There is a moment, just one, that cannot be verified. Only whispered centuries later in the back rooms of royal libraries. They say he moved, not in pain, not to flee, but deliberately one final step forward into the rising gold, as if embracing it. And then, nothing. The tomb is sealed the same night. The chamber, still glowing with residual heat, is enclosed with massive stone slabs and earth packed tight with pitch and clay. The remaining priests, those who survived the heat, are not seen again. Some believe they were entombed with him. Others believe they fled, hunted by those who wished to erase the memory. Only 2 details survive the obliteration. The first, a ring of fire-blackened statues found centuries later around the mountain gorge. Each statue is identical, featureless, humanoid, arms raised. Some are fused to the earth, others partially melted. No inscriptions. The second, a charred tablet unearthed in the ruins of the palace far to the south. On it, just a single line etched by shaking hands. He died believing he would rise. He did not. But questions remain. If he died in the tomb, why was it never looted? Why, in the centuries that followed, did 3 separate expeditions to the gorge vanish without trace? And what of the tale recorded in the scrolls of a later Babylonian priest who wrote of a golden effigy that moved under its own power, headless, wordless, burning with heat even in the winter? It is here, at the edge of record and legend, that the Golden King blurs into myth. Some say his soul was trapped in the gold, that the metal, molten with his blood and thought, became something else, a prison, an afterlife, a weapon. Others believe the tomb was a warning, that what happened beneath that mountain was not transcendence, but a terrible failure, a man's war with mortality ending in silent agony. The empire collapses within a generation. With its central power entombed, civil war erupts. Regional governors declare themselves kings. Temples once loyal to the sun, God, are stripped and rededicated. The name of the Golden King is struck from record. His statues are melted, inscriptions scrubbed. A few are buried upside down beneath the foundations of new temples, an ancient curse upon the memory of his reign. Yet his influence lingers. In the art of later dynasties, a new motif appears. A man bathed in molten light, arms open, face hidden. In the funeral rites of distant lands, molten metals are poured into burial urns. Gold becomes more than wealth. It becomes a path to the divine, or a warning of its failure. Even today, somewhere in that forgotten gorge, his tomb may remain, lost, buried in centuries of dust and myth, sealed not with reverence, but with fear, waiting. The sun beats down over a dead land. Centuries have passed since the last whisper of the Golden King echoed across the plains. His empire, once draped in fear and fire, lies fractured, its cities crumbled, its ziggurats sunken and half swallowed by dust. The names of his generals, priests, and enemies have scattered into the winds of oral myth, remembered only in curses carved beneath new foundations, and yet his shadow lingers. In a remote excavation site near the northern ridges of the Diyala Basin, an archaeologist in the 19th century uncovers a shard of gold-infused stone curved unnaturally, fused with blackened bone. Initial reports dismiss it as a burial accident. Later, under closer scrutiny, it reveals something impossible, a fragment of human rib, sealed in a hardened layer of once molten gold. No inscriptions, no context, just a single trace. The excavation is halted. There is no formal report filed with the Ottoman authorities. The local shepherds who guided the researchers to the gorge warn them to leave. The fireman sleeps there, they say in Kurdish dialect, and the mountain remembers. It's not the first time that warning is spoken. Records from earlier Islamic scholars describe a cursed site in the same region, where animals refuse to graze and compasses fail to hold true north. Some claim the heat never leaves the soil, even in winter. But historical memory is a fragile thing. What little we know of the Golden King comes from contradiction scribes who tried to forget him, traitors who feared to name him, and enemies who hoped their victories would eclipse his story. But one thread remains unbroken: the legend of his death. Across cultures, across time, the motif endures. A king dies by gold. A man of flesh chooses fire. Whether Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, or mythologized in Persian and Greek, echoes centuries later, his story takes root. In an old Hellenistic poem attributed to a lost work of Berossus, a single line reads, "And the king who swallowed the sun died screaming in his treasure. Who was he truly? A tyrant, a prophet, a madman crowned in delusion, or a man who, like so many before and after him, believed the divine could be forged by mortal hands? The evidence is scarce, and the scholars divided. One camp believes he was a forgotten king of a minor Mesopotamian dynasty, his story bloated by oral myth and temple propaganda. Another insists he was no king at all, but a conflation of multiple figures, a narrative stitched from fragments, anchored by the horror of his death. But all agree on one thing: something happened. Whether by ritual or revolt, whether in worship or punishment, the image of a man sealed in molten gold voluntarily or not etched itself so deeply into human memory that it crossed languages, epochs, and empires. A detail often overlooked: in the ruins of the king's palace, buried beneath a collapsed hall of statues, a gold coin was found. On one side, the mark of the sun. On the other, an unmarked human face, eyeless, mouthless, smooth. A mask, not worn, but cast. And then there's the last tablet, discovered in 1921 by a French team near the alleged tomb site. Barely legible, cracked, burnt, likely a forgery, many said. But one line is clear: he did not fear death, he feared being forgotten, and perhaps in that he succeeded. Even buried beneath molten gold, sealed in silence, his story survived. Twisted, rewritten, feared, remembered. There are no records of his real name, only the legacy of his obsession, only the myth of a man who tried to escape death by drowning in eternity, only the echo of fire flickering in the dark. Buried beneath the weight of centuries, the Golden King remains more myth than man. His body vanished, his words erased, and yet his presence still trembles in the cracks of forgotten stone. We do not know the sound of his voice, the softness of his skin, or whether he truly believed he was divine, but we remember the fire, the gold, the choice to face mortality not with humility, but with molten arrogance. In a world that worshipped gods in sky and storm, he built his temple within the earth, sealed not with prayer, but with heat. And in doing so, he left behind a warning, carved in silence, that power without limit becomes madness without end. So when the desert wind howls through broken ruins, and the sun sets blood red over ancient sands, we remember him not for his empire, not for his wealth, but for the blinding price he paid to never be forgotten.